We've all seen the crime movies and TV shows using polygraph tests to prove a suspect's guilt. But when it comes to actually deciding on a person's life between being guilty or innocent, how much can we trust this technology? Would you use the technology to prove your innocence or possibly prove your guilt? There are many aspects of this technology I'd like to share with you and how the polygraph test works, what entities use this technology, and why it's not admissible in the US court systems because of how accurate it is. I've always been interested in the criminal justice system and everything involved in finding a person guilty or innocent. This certain type of technology could really impact someone you love, know, or even you. Should this technology be used as a tool or something so firm as much as, we use DNA now? First of all, it's important to understand how a polygraph works, why it was invented, and the second agencies that use this technology are also the ones that don't allow it anymore as evidence into the courtroom. So let's begin with talking about what exactly a polygraph test is. So this is the visual aid that I brought. As everyone knows, this is from Meet the Parents. And as you can see, he's got the polygraph test set up. And how it's worked is actually there's two bands that go around your abdominal and your upper chest. There is I think this is on your finger testing your pulse, as well as a blood pressure cuff, which is down here. So I thought this was kind of funny because a lot of people know it. But as you can tell here, in a movie it is hilarious, but in real life there are real people that are terrified using it, and just being questioned itself that would also throw out the, inaccuracies, basically. The inventor was William Moulton Marston. It was in the 1920s, and he invented just basically a blood pressure cuff. That's not how they, was today. But that's how they would test it. And they would ask questions. And if your heart rate jumped up on a certain point, they would assume you're lying. And that's kind of how it first started. They obviously have developed it more in depth. And they're trying to work on getting a few more optional ways on testing and asking questions and trying to see how people react to see if they're guilty or innocent. There is a new test that's called the Guilty Knowledge Test that's come up recently, I think in the last 5 or 10 years. And basically how it works is they ask you a series of questions, and your reaction, if you are guilty, is going to react to whatever that instance happened. Like, for instance, they would ask you, was $500 taken? Was $1,000 taken? Was $15,000 taken? And if you were guilty, you would know the exact amount of how much was taken, and you'd have a reaction to it, and they would assume that you're guilty. So we've talked about kind of how it works. The companies that use it are mostly government agencies, obviously. There is a news article that came out that the Los Angeles Police Department has arrested 30 people and found them guilty when they gave an initial polygraph test showing that there were some irregularities, or that they thought they were lying, and so they did more background checks and found that they in fact were guilty. So LA is using this a lot. They think it's a very powerful tool. However, when we come to typical crimes and stuff like that, it's not admissible in court. The inaccurate results that they found, that about 50% of people who are innocent actually show a guilty when being questioned. So I thought that was kind of fascinating, interesting. There is a lot of skepticism as far as, how the questions are arranged and all of that. So there isn't enough black and white as far as how it's supposed to be performed. And so it can't be widely accepted. Next, we talk about, basically kind of goes into more of why it isn't widely accepted. And it really has a lot to do with psychologists and overall psychotherapists that have viewed this as a completely invalid way of finding if someone is truly guilty, because of the fact that there are people out there that possibly don't feel guilt for what they did, so they won't have a reaction, so they could possibly pass it. The evidence does indicate that there are ways of beating the system. In fact, there was an inmate, they ended up starting a fight, and about 15 inmates got in trouble. And this one inmate taught them all how to pass the test by asking the control questions, the beginning questions of, how old are you, where are you born, all of that. And they would bite their tongues on the control questions to make their heart rates jump. And then when they were asked the questions about the crime, they would have the same heart rate, which would show that they were telling the truth, which in fact they weren't. So even just simple things like that, to be able to beat it is kind of, significant enough to not be able to put so much leeway on this. There was, in the county court system, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the polygraph test about 10 years ago. And there was a Dr. Sachs who did a research basically providing the information on how unethical and constitutional violations were happening, because they could ask questions that would almost push you to have to lie, which would make it look like you were lying. So there's a lot of issues and kind of some weird things with that. It wasn't very easy to work. Beating the test has just been one of those things that most people are aware of doing. Whether you are guilty or not, you want to be right and you want to be calm, and there's just not a lot out there to calm yourself. So overall, basically, the polygraph testing is a unique way that some, law enforcements are using to, provide them kind of an insight into if someone's telling the truth, and they can continue on with that. But it definitely is not telling 100% if someone is guilty or innocent, which is what I think we used to believe when it was, first introduced and coming into the court systems. There's a strong willingness to try and find a test that does find out if people are telling the truth or not. I mean, how wonderful would that be if we could just, hook somebody up to something and say, did you do this? No or yes. And, it's 100% accurate. It's just not how our brains work or our bodies work. So, there's a lot of debate, and I think there is a lot of unfortunate holes in how the system and the technology works, because there's so many errors and issues that could go wrong with it. So I don't think that it needs to be something that is out there. I think that we need to improve the technology. So thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.